Hello and welcome to We Are the Deluge, a spoiler-free chapter-by-chapter podcast about the climate change novel The Deluge by Stephen Markley. We are your co-hosts, Emily Crandall and John McMahon, anonymous hackers of some sort of Nordic persuasion, perhaps? Today we are discussing the book 4 headline splash on page 551, which we are presenting in the form of a dramatic reading and discussion. I can't believe we're on page 551. This is crazy.
I know. Well, we're about 2/3 of the way through the book, page-wise, if more than that chapter-wise.
Wow.
Prion, begin your journey.
We will make them feel pain. That's a promise. God is readying his sword. That's a promise. I will be president. That's a promise.
I was going to do that one. And Nosiki.
Thousands threaten to walk away from mortgages. Tidal flooding in Florida creates headache for banks, homeowners.
It was the second greatest terrorist attack in this country's history, and it was perpetrated by our own government.
It's now been 9 months since mission control at NASA and SpaceX last received a transmission from the Mars mission.
I think it's not a coincidence that we both tried to avoid some of the same headline splashes we want to avoid. I feel comfortable describing this as the least fun of the headline splashes. Does that seem appropriate?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, it's brutal.
There's so much that's about the siege, the aftermath of the siege, and the ripple effects of the siege. And I think it sets up a problematic that we will be exploring, I imagine, in the next chapter, in the Ash chapter, that this, I think, headline splash is asking us to think about what are the ways that politics as usual, politics as normal political wrangling prevent a nation, prevent the United States from dealing with atrocity.
Yeah, totally. And like what's a way to describe it without like already spilling over into the Ash chapter, but like the sort of like deflecting or the games that have to be played to accommodate extremist positions, right?
Yeah.
That like, this is another version of like the most horrifying view that we think of as totally unrelated to politics as usual, getting co-opted, taken up, and sort of like incorporated, right, into politics as usual, which is, I think, an apt but scarily hollow phrase.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about kind of the ripple effects, because there's also this, I mean, even portion of the page, the two most Europe focused as well are also about right-wing, white supremacist, ultranationalist violence.
Yeah. So I looked up, there's the long one, which is about Operation Vigilante Sentry underway.
What a name.
Which I think is being set up by the US, but it's looking to Fortress Europe as a model. Is that correct?
Okay. That's how I understood it.
And then the 6 Arms is calling for a unified Europe to open fire on all refugee boats. So I was looking up, I know that Fortress Europe is a term that folks actually do use in the news to talk about Europe's kind of last 20 years, basically, of immigration policy, particularly as it pertains to refugees.
Yes.
But I was curious about its longer history, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it has a origin in World War II, and it was actually a term deployed by both the British and the Nazis, but that meant like there were basically kind of two different defenses of like what Europe is kind of in the context of World War II. So in Britain, it was used for like to describe basically the kind of the difficult position that sort of like pilots are put into in the armed forces when they have to go drop bombs on something that is like Europe, right? And it's both like a kind of praise of their defense of Europe, but also a sort of recognition of what's kind of fraught about it. And then from the Nazi perspective, it's literally like the fortification of Europe as imagined to be the purview of like the Germans, right? Which sounds more like Mussolini fascism than I think we're used to maybe thinking about the Nazi project as, although obviously there's a lot of points of resonance there. And then like very quickly, the British dropped Fortress Europe and like sort of dissuaded it from being used publicly after the war, in part because I think of its association with the Nazi framing of it, but also I think because it already was understood as a kind of like regressive way to imagine the relationship of Europe to the rest of the world, especially in the wake of kind of like anti-colonial, decolonial projects in World War II. So like it really quickly falls out of favor in the UK. And then I think now you mostly hear it used sort of as a critique, right? You don't really hear it, I think, championed by like European politicians who are passing these policies that get described as part of Fortress Europe. Although I could be wrong about that.
I mean, I do wonder, and this is in part the context of the book, and I feel fine Minnie spoiling a tiny, tiny piece of the Ash chapter, that I believe it's the Ash chapter, we find out that Six Arms is the alliance of all the right-wing, white nationalist parties of Europe.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if the AFD is using Fortress Europe
self-consciously,
or praising the idea of Fortress Europe, or saying we need to accelerate the creation of Fortress Europe, or whatever the case is, in our own 2025 timeline.
Speaking of Six Arms, this was my other like conspiracy theory deep dive, wondering if it's a reference to anything in particular.
I appreciate your dedication to this podcast. So
there is a Marvel comic called Six Arms Saga, which is a Spider-Man arc, which is the first appearance of a character called Morbius the Living Vampire. And it's a story where Spider-Man's actually trying to cure himself, and he ends up accidentally like sprouting six arms. And then when he defeats the vampire, but the vampire isn't dead, but he sort of disappears mysteriously, and Spider-Man manages to get a hold of some of his blood and like is able to use the vampire's blood to cure himself of his Spider-Man affliction, even of the six arms, which is kind of crazy. But also Six Arms is like a recurring kind of theme to describe a bunch of different deities in like South Asian religions. So like in Buddhism and Hinduism and stuff. And it's usually like a way of sort of describing the divine capacity to wield or bear kind of multiple symbols of power and strength at once. So like the arms are all representative of those, things that gods have mastered or are masters of, centered in kind of one body.
So the white nationalists have some Leviathan inferiority complex, is what you're telling me.
I think so. That's my hot take.
If we want to reject the idea of the death of the author and just give Markley full intentionality and control, it would not surprise me if he's like, oh, the swastika was stolen, right, from the non-West and turned into a symbol of white supremacy and genocide. So what would be another symbol I could take to turn into a symbol of white supremacy and genocide in that appropriative way?
Yep. Okay, one more research thing. The anthrax or the virus in Siberia headline splash, right, references an anthrax scare that killed several Russian citizens in the 2010s. And then this one is a flu that likely infected animals now long extinct. And it's the release is the most troubling epidemiological event since COVID-19. So I was looking up the incident in the 2010s, and there's a recent journal or a recent article in, I forget what journal, but it's like a scientific journal produced by a bunch of Russian scientists that talk about basically the climatic causes of that anthrax break. So it's like I think like 68 people died at least on the record. So not even, what does it say here? Several Russian citizens. Yeah. It's like kind of a lot, right? But basically what happened is there was like a warming period in like the early 2000s that then was followed by a freezing period. So there was a layer between like the soil that thaws and freezes every year and the permafrost that was soft. and never refroze basically during the warming period. And so then there was like something it basically whatever thawed from the permafrost got trapped underneath like 2 years of frost. And so the anthrax was like in that permafrost essentially. So and this is a study that came out in 2021. And so they were like, this is a huge problem for like whatever else is stored, whatever other anthrax or something else is stored in that permafrost, that if we don't figure this out, like we're going to have to address, in advance or not, right? Or let die, right? All the people that might be affected by this. So I was like, that's a really short like wink to a thing that really happened, A, that has a climatic cause, B, and that C is likely to happen again.
And this is an effect of, I've spent so much time with this book that I'm not entirely clear on what is the book and what is our own world, which is true of many parts of this headline splash, actually, that I don't know if it's because of this book or because of political discourse or because I saw a headline of the study you referenced, that I don't know where my vague uneducated, misplaced, but maybe not misplaced concern about, well, what diseases are in the permafrost exists. That's latent in my mind body, but I don't know where it comes from. And I don't know if it's from the deluge or the world or both.
Or both. And what's the difference at this point, John?
That's so true with this headline splash. It's once again the deja vu, the near future that is our present timeline of the novel, The Deluge.
Okay, I have one more thing and then I promise I'm done.
Perfect.
There's a headline that says whistleblower sheds light on plan to use live ammunition in DC siege. Do you think we, the reader, know who this whistleblower is?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Because Tinkerbell wouldn't know. Right, Shane's source and the Joint Terrorism Task Force, I don't think.
Okay.
And that'd be too risky, right? Okay. I'm not trying to play cryptic foreshadowing. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. So I was like, yeah.
And Chen, it strikes me, also wouldn't expose himself in this way, despite his willingness to be critical or skeptical.
Right. Okay. That was all.
I just like to point out there's a little bit of political economy that also prefigures the Ash chapter here. The refusing to pay their mortgage, or is it to pay insurance or pay the mortgage? I forget.
Mortgage.
Yeah. Obviously, there's been a lot of coverage with every natural, quote unquote, disaster. We can problematize the natural there. One or both of us might do so next episode for all I know. Then that's a very much present discourse as well. And then obviously there's the kind of food prices have exploded. That's part of this chapter as well. And WTF is Prion and Ananosiki. I don't know how to say it. We do find out what that is. I don't think we ever find out what Prion is.
I was so pleased that you started with that one. I imagined it in like a Black Mirror, like voiceover, begin your journey, like calming lady voice.
I imagined it as, and maybe this is actually, I should have looked this up. I did Children of Men, I think, in the last episode, that there is that like, euthanasia kit that you can order in the film Children of Men. That's what I imagined Prion is.
Whoa, that's fascinating. I honestly was thinking like Xenon girl of the 21st century. Yes. I don't know. It just seems like a word that goes there.
Yeah, I think that fits too.
Which is a cultural artifact I haven't thought about in a long time until just right now.
Same.
Anything we're missing?
I don't think so. I think we close this headline splash and continue forward.
Beautiful. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for this headline splash. Up next, we have the 4th chapter from Ash's point of view, executive summary on the elevated price of grain staples set in 2034.
Beautiful or not beautiful?
Remains to be seen.
Thank you for listening to We Are the Deluge.
And we are the Deluge.